For this video, I'm going to take the song Bye Bye Blackbird, written in 1926 by Ray Henderson and Mort Dixon, and step you through a tutorial, creating a chord arrangement. The song is now in the public domain, and it's exciting that we're getting these songs from the Great American Songbook freely available. I use a fakebook version of the chart with some pretty straightforward chords and build the arrangement in 2 steps. First, I'll add in the 3rd and the 7th to each voicing. Then I'll go back and spice it up a bit, harmonically and rhythmically. Let's take a look. So first we'll make a chart of all the chords that we need for this song. Because it's in F major, we'll build the F major scale and then build the diatonic chords in that key. So we have F major 7, G minor 7, A minor 7, B flat major 7, C 7, D minor 7, and E half diminished 7. We're also going to need a few other chords, so let's make a little chart of those as well. We need F6, F7, G minor, and then this kind of unusual chord, G minor major 7. You'll see how that works with the voice leading a little later. We'll need an A flat diminished 7 chord, and you can see here if we build this up, remember a fully diminished 7 chord is all minor thirds from the root. We get some pretty ornery looking notes there, double flats. We're going to respell those with our enharmonics. So that'll be A flat, C flat, and we'll use D natural and F natural. And then we have E flat 7, D 7, and D flat 7. It's beyond the scope of this video to show how to build all of these chords, but just remember that the 7 chords like that are major triads with minor 7ths above them. The next thing we'll do is identify the 3rd and the 7th of each chord, because we'll need that to build our voicings. Now here we take those 3rds and 7ths that we identified on the chord chart and write them above each chord on the actual chart, so that'll help us to make our arrangement. And finally, we go back to the beginning and actually write those notes in. So take the root tone of each chord and put it down in the bass. Take the 3rd and the 7th and put it up. You can usually include that in the right hand. If the melody has the 3rd, which it does in the 1st chord, then you don't need to write it again. Just write the 7th underneath. Now in this 4th measure, we have an F major 7, so we're putting an E and an A down below the melody note. Notice the melody note moves to F, and that E is going to be rather dissonant, and that's why the chord changes to F6, which is a common solution for that, to change to the 6th of a chord instead of the 7th when the melody is actually the root tone. Here the chord is F/A, which means an F triad with A in the bass. So for this chord, we're going to use a complete chord. We'll just put the A in the bass, leave the melody as it is, and we'll also add the 5th of the chord, C. Here we have the A flat, fully diminished 7 chord, so we'll add the 3rd and the 7th. The 3rd is C flat, and the 7th is actually G double flat, but we'll spell it as F to make it easy to read. Okay, 3rd and 7th for the next 2 chords. But notice in the measure that follows, I'm going to take those same notes and put it in a lower register. That'll be a nice little echo effect. Now take a look at these next 4 chords. They have really interesting voice leading. The G of the G minor moves to the F sharp of the G minor major 7, which moves to the F of the G minor 7, and finally to the E of the C7. That's really nice chromatically descending voice leading, and we're going to want to keep that in the same voice. Also look at the D in the 2nd measure here. Because the G minor chord is going for so long, over 3 measures, I've decided to alternate the bass. What that means is instead of providing the root as the lowest tone, I provided the 5th of the chord. Now I'm just going to continue with this arrangement, placing the root of the chord in the bass and the 3rd and the 7th up in the right hand. Shall we listen to what we have so far? Here's the first half of the piece. Let me just quickly finish the 2nd half. It's pretty straightforward. I'll just put the root tones in the bass and the 3rds and the 7ths up there in the right hand. Notice that we've got that nice little chromatic descending line again with that string of G minor chords. Also, take a look at that A half diminished 7 chord. Now in that chord, the 5th is a very particular note. It's a lowered 5, E flat. So we'll include that in the voicing. and then we'll finish up the rest of the chords here. All right, let's listen to the second half. So that's a really nice foundation for this arrangement, but you can hear that it needs a little spicing up. So I'm going to take the next several minutes and show you how I'm going to do that. If you prefer just to skip to the end and hear the finished product, go ahead and click on the link below. Okay, now I'm going to go to the second part of making this arrangement, and I'm going to enhance it a little bit. First thing I want to do, which I did a little bit before, is that when I have a chord and I put the root tone in the bass, I can also put the fifth in the bass. And I can alternate those notes. That's really common with bass players, and we call that an alternating bass. So the root of the F chord is F, but the fifth is C. So I'm going to come here and add a C, and these will be half notes. And then the other thing, I'm going to add a little gentle two-beat feeling, and I'm going to put this chord, instead of right on the beat, I'm going to put it on the off beats, on beats 2 and 4. So instead of there, I'm going to put it here. And I can also fatten that up a little bit. That's the fifth of the chord. So I'm going to start with a rest. And let's actually make that a half note and then a quarter note here. Here I'm going to actually borrow something from the original sheet music from 1926, in which they put a B flat chord right on that beat before going to the F chord. And so I'm going to put a D and an F instead of the E. And then I'll bring it down to the F chord right here, so that it sort of tracks the rhythm. So it's just a couple of neighbor tones, really, is all that is. Here, the only change I'm going to make is I'm going to have these chords match the rhythm of a melody a little bit. So let's make those dotted quarter notes, and then let's bring the C7 in right here. And we'll tie that right there. It's okay if that's a little out of sync with the bass line, because that'll add a nice little syncopation. And here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to bring in the chord a little bit earlier here. So we'll make these dotted quarter notes and bring that chord in here. Seems like there's a little stopped motion here in the bass, here and here. So let's go ahead and do the same concept of adding the fifth as an alternating bass on half notes. So F will go to C, and we'll do the same thing here. F will go to C. Now here we have a rather long stretch with just one chord. I'm going to fill that in with a little arpeggio. So I'm just going to enhance this chord a little bit and make it an F major 7. A C, E, F, and then we can pick that up in the right hand. A, C, D. It's like almost like a little pentatonic scale. And we'll do the same thing here with the A flat, fully diminished 7. Let's go ahead and actually, we'll use all the notes of that A flat diminished 7 chord, which would be A flat, C flat, which is like a B, and then E double flat, but we're not going to spell it that. We'll spell it as a D, and the G double flat, we'll spell it as an F. It'll make it a little easier to play. So we'll start with a rest here, and we'll start with a D, F, A flat, and then we'll pick that up on the right hand. C flat, which is already here, D, and F. And this is good. I don't think we need to make any changes to this section. I already have the chords sort of syncopated and a little bit of variety that we added before. Oh, let's go ahead and add our bounce like we did at the beginning. Let's repeat that kind of a pattern. So instead of bringing the chord in right here, let's start with a rest. And then we'll bring the chord in right here as a half note. That's the root and the fifth. It's just a triad here, so it's not a very fancy chord. Let's go ahead and alter the bass, the G and D. That's the root and the fifth. Here, I like this. This is coming down to the major 7th on that minor chord. Let's just fatten the chord up a little bit, and let's let that chord syncopate along with a melody like this. Then let's continue our alternating bass, but instead of bringing the D in there, let's keep our going with the same pattern, G and then D. And then we've got a B flat and an F. Let's go ahead and again syncopate the chord along with the melody. And we'll keep our alternating bass going. And you've guessed it, we'll syncopate the chord here as well. Let's keep our alternating bass going. So with a C7 chord, the root is C and the fifth is G. So we could go up to the G or down to the G, either one. Here's our G minor 7. I'm going to add the fifth in this chord, which is D, because I'm going to try to build some nice voice leading into the 9th of this chord. So there's the D, we'll put it right there. Now I'm going to connect the G with the C. I can keep going with this alternating bass, but I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to try a couple of measures of a walking bass. A walking bass is something that happens on quarter notes. And what happens is this chord needs to connect with this chord. So I'm going to go up the scale until I get to that chord. Sometimes there are not quite enough notes to write all quarter notes. Like here, I'm going to get to the C too fast. So watch me add a chromatic passing tone. I'm just going to step up the scale. G, A, B flat, and instead of going right to C, I'll do B natural first. And that'll connect very nicely with a C. And if I want to keep that going with a walking bass, I could just step down, go up and down. That might, I don't know, I like to add a little more variety than that. So another thing a bass player will do is they will often jump an octave down and then step up. So I've connected the C to the F. Again, I could have just written a straight scale coming down. That would have worked. But I tried something a little different. Down an octave and then step up. And this, remember I said I wanted to add a ninth. Let's actually add a flat ninth to the C7. Remember, that's the same as the second of that chord, which is a D. I'll put it here, but let's make a D flat. This is good. I don't think I'll change anything except to maybe make my alternating bass F to C. And then I've got a long stretch of just an F6. I'm going to put a little line here, just like a little counter melody. I think you'll like this. This will connect with a melody on the next page. So here is the next page. That melody that I wrote connects up to this F, which is the melody note that begins the second section of this song. I'm going to try an interesting voicing here. I've got two measures of an F7, and I'm going to enhance this chord with a ninth, which is a G. Remember, that's the same as a second. And with a 13th, which is the same as a sixth. And that would be a D. And I'm going to create a voicing. I'll bring them in the exact same way. But instead of those notes, I'm going to play the G and the D here. And I'm going to bring the A and the E flat that I had originally and put them down here in the left hand. Now that makes a very nice voicing. I didn't line that up very well because I had that chord here, but it'll go all at the same time. I'll put a rest here. The reason I like this is because I've got a voicing that's all fourths. Notice C, down a fourth to G, down a fourth to D, down a fourth to A, and then down an augmented fourth to E flat. That's a really nice sounding voicing. So this gives me a nice opportunity to do something a little bit fancy with that chord. I've got to keep going here. I'm going to just do something a little bit linear with that melody. That's a nice stepwise melody. Let me just complement it there with another line in the left hand. That's a sixth lower. So C down to E flat, which is a note of the chord. That'll sound real nice. And I'll just trace that same melody here. Okay, this is the E flat 7. I'm going to add a note in this voicing that you might find to be rather dissonant. And because the D flat is here, that's the 7th, I'm going to add the 6th as well right here. That creates a little minor second cluster. You know, when you listen to it, you can decide if you like that sound or not, but I think I like that little twist of a sound right at that point. And then I'm come to the D7 chord here. I'll just add the D to make that a little bit thicker. And I'm going to make one of those walking bass lines that connects with a G. To do that, remember I told you that you could make the bass player or your left hand on the piano jump an octave. So from the D down to the D and then step up. This, of course, at this point is going to be E natural and then F sharp. So if I wanted to walk, or if I wanted to connect to this, notice what I could do in the left hand here. I could put the 5th, but I could also go up an octave like that. Notice how that connects nicely with the D. I like the stepwise motion here. And then an octave up, stepwise down, octave down. See, there's a sense of compensation and balance about what I'm doing in that bass line. This is the G minor chord. This should be a half note here. And I'm going to do something a little different here. Instead of always the bass line in the left hand, I'm going to just alter that up a little bit and take that F sharp and have that be in the lowest voice. So I'm going to put the F sharp here I can actually do this all with the left hand. F sharp there, the B flat, and the D. We'll make that a half note like that. And then we'll let the F sharp come down to F natural here. All right, so I won't need those notes there. Just a little variety in the way the voicings are working. And then we've got the D flat 7 chord. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of alternating bass, the root and the 5th. Maybe a little rhythm here. A little syncopation in the rhythm. And then the C7. Oh, well, we've been getting a lot of use out of this. Let's do it again. This is the C, coming down an octave to the C, and then coming up and connecting with the next chord, F. This we'll do just like we did at the very beginning. It's almost like the very first 2 measures of the song. So we'll add the alternating bass again, and we'll shift that to the offbeats, and we'll trace the melody here. Remember, we added a B flat chord here, so we'll put that in here. Let's go ahead, instead of putting those 2 notes together, let's do them as alternating bass. So we'll take the E flat and put it here. That's the root and the 5th. And let's go ahead and trace the chord so that it matches the melody. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll add the alternating bass in the left hand, and we'll fill in the chord here. I'm going to add a flat 9th. A flat 9th is on the D7 chord. It's the same as the 2nd degree. So it's E flat, and I'll put it right here. That'll sound good because the E flat, of course, was also in this chord. That doesn't look like an E flat. Let's make that a little more clear. The E flat was right here, and it just carries into this chord, and then we can resolve it down to the D here. And this is good. Let's just fill that chord in a little bit. And when the note goes high, let's just change the voicing just a little bit. It's the same notes. Oh, this is a good place for another walking bass. Remember, we did this. We connected the G with the C with quarter notes, but we added a chromatic passing tone before we got to the C. And we can do what we did before here as well, where we jumped the octave. Let's see, this one we can fill in this chord a little bit. Notice the D that I put here. Let's make that D flat here. That would be the flat 9th. And we'll continue with the D flat there as well. And the last chord is good. Let's give it all a listen. Well, you may have noticed a few additional enhancements I made in that recording. First, I included a turnaround right after the first time I played through the piece so that I could go back and then play a solo. And then I played a solo, which I suppose we could cover in a different video. And then finally I added a tag ending. The last three chords are G minor 7, C7, and F6, but I backed up on the circle of fifths and played A minor 7, D7, G minor 7, C7, and then a F6, just to extend it a little bit. And then the last few notes that I played are kind of stolen from Fats Waller.